Welcome. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session. Today we're going to be discussing tackling damp and mould through a customer-first approach. My name is Abigail Seward, and I'm the Director of Account Management at Mobysoft, and I'm really pleased to be chairing this panel today. Tackling damp and mould, as we know, remains a persistent challenge across the sector, even for landlords with strong operational performance like Raven and Greatwell, who are represented here today. And expectations, as we know, are rising. From October this year, Awaab's law will mean that landlords have to investigate, have to respond to cases of serious damp and mould within strict legal timeframes. And at the same time, the new consumer standards and the tenant satisfaction measures have really raised the bar for how landlords have to engage, have to communicate, and ultimately have to deliver for their residents. And I think what we're witnessing across the sector is the increase in damp and mould reports and how that's impacting the responsive repairs services. And I know that many organisations in response to that are moving from reactive repairs to a proactive repairs service delivery. And that increasingly involves using tools like AI and machine learning, and of course making operational changes. So in this session, we're going to be exploring how that shift is playing out on the ground and what it means for the way in which we manage damp and mould at scale. So I'm sure you're going to hear some practical insights from our panellists today, and then we'll allow time afterwards for a Q&A. There's a Slido code up there, so if you know how to use it, please do, and the questions will be there ready, or there'll be a microphone that will go around afterwards. So before we get started, let's get to know our panellists. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, your name, role, organisation, and then we'll get into our discussion. Suzy.
Hi everyone, I'm Suzy Thomas and I'm Repair Success Director at Mobysoft.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Ryan, Head of Property Services at Raven Housing Trust.
Hi there, my name is James Norton. I'm the Repairs and Maintenance Manager for Greatwell Homes.
Brilliant. So let's start at what really underpins all of this, and that's putting the customer first. If I could ask you, James, initially, could you share with the audience some specific examples of how putting the customer at the heart of your damp and mould response has led to a better outcome?
Yes, so part of the work that we did with our customers, we engaged with our customer assembly group. We looked into working out where there was stigma, how we can reduce that stigma. There was elements of customers feeding back there was embarrassment when they were talking to us, not wanting to report defects with their home. We looked to adjust that, looked to work with a fabric-first approach to remove that element where someone may feel guilt or may feel embarrassment, and look at their property and their individual circumstances. So as part of that work, the main thing was about trying to get into our customer's home, trying to build that rapport with them and trying to build on it. Lots of our data that came through with part of the support from Mobysoft was actually around access and getting into those homes. So some of the adjustments that we did would bring in a 9 till 2, which would be a school run appointment. So our customers could then fit us into their lives as opposed to us sending that letter out saying, we want to come out and see you. So it is around that terminology, around that stigma, around changing your approach and being a little bit more respectful with those around you.
And how have your residents responded, your customers, to the changes that you've made?
So our access rate has increased. There's a lot more trust between landlord and customer when it comes to that, and that shows within our data as well. We've communicated to them that we do use AI within our data to be able to know when we need to come and see you and have that proactive visit. And initially the feedback we had was a small amount of resistance because AI can be an intrusive thing into people's minds. It can be that big brother element. But as soon as they could start to see, actually, you're knocking on my door, making contact with me prior to me needing to call you, they saw that benefit.
Yeah. And would you say that building that trust has been really integral to being able to deliver a customer-first approach?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think whether it be through the media or whether it may be just the perception of the big bad landlord, and that's not what we're there. We're there to build those communities, to build those environments where people can thrive, and with that comes that trust.
Yeah. And what about you, Michael the same question. What have you seen at Raven? What changes have you made to ensure that you're really putting the customer first in your strategy?
So about 15 months ago, we embarked on a repairs service design project, and two streams to that, the responsive repairs, but also damp and mould. But for both streams, we took complaint data, we took customer sentiment from TSMs, customer satisfaction, instant feedback, text messages that we had, and we journey mapped the customer process for responsive repairs and for damp and mould. So before we started redesigning processes, policies, procedures, used that customer journey mapping to understand what the pain points for customers first and why they were pain points that led to complaints, led to no access, and used that to engineer a new process. And as part of the damp and mould, we made it interactive with the customer portal, and we had about 10 customers as part of that journey that came in and said, this is how we want to interact with the portal, and those 10 customers also did the testing as well from a customer perspective.
And by going through that process, was there anything that surprised you in terms of the discovery that you had to go through with your residents to see what's bespoke to them? James was talking about ensuring that they were allowing the school holidays to be inputted, or the school time. So what surprised you, or if anything?
I think it was a confirmation really of customers just want us to do what we say we're going to do when we're going to do it, and there was flexibility on both sides. So some customers said, like, appointments are good, but actually if you're going to give me an appointment, turn up and say what you're going to do on that appointment, and designing that into the process was the most important thing.
So really going back to first principles, basics.
Get the basics boringly perfected.
Interesting. Suzy, you work with lots of organisations across the sector. From your wider vantage point, what do you see as the key cultural or operational barriers that hinder some landlords from taking a truly customer-first approach?
Yeah, I think from what I'm seeing within organisations today, and I do speak from experience because prior to Mobysoft, I worked in the sector for 15 years, working as a complaints manager, customer services manager, working very close with repairs. So I experienced it then, and I see it still to this day. I think we're very reliant on our customers proactively telling us where maybe we're getting things wrong or we could do better, in the form of surveys, looking at our complaint outcomes. And I know from my own experience of managing complaints teams, resource feels low, and a lot of the time is spent trying to find a resolution, responding to a customer. There's limited time to actually address the outcomes and the changes within teams. And I think with repairs in particular, I work with operational managers, and they say to me, one, we are so busy with our reactive day-to-day role, but we are bogged down with complaints, which takes us away from our delivery of the live service. So I think culturally we need to kind of shift from expecting customers to tell us where we can do better, and trying to look at it before it gets to that stage. So look at the issues. This issue with repairs are sat within your data. So I read this every day in job descriptions. So rather than relying on survey responses and complaints, it's sat within your job descriptions. I read these every day. Customers, especially with the introduction of customer portals, they are actually writing in their own words what their experience of repairs is. They tell you this has been an ongoing issue, that it's affecting my family and my health. And if we can surface all of those problematic repairs and look at what is working well and segregate the two, and really focus on putting it right first time, then it just feeds into the rest of the service delivery resource. Customer complaints will reduce, satisfaction will be higher.
Yeah.
So it's shifting that culture of wait to be told to let's find the answers that already exist in our data.
Yeah, so but what you're describing is being proactive, and then I think all of you have talked about listening to people, and that's the engagement piece, isn't it? But I suppose that being customer-led clearly drives service changes and delivery. However, you really need the right tools and the technology to do that at scale, don't you? If you've got thousands of properties, getting behind every door, speaking to every tenant is, that's a huge task. So I think if we're thinking about technology and data, where do you see, and this is for all, perhaps I could ask Michael first, the biggest opportunities for technology to improve both how we manage work in progress, so WIP, and also prevent recurring damp and mould issues?
I think the first part in terms of managing the work in progress, that's, being a self-reflection on your service of where are we now, where do we want to be, and what's the reporting mechanism of looking between the two, and how do we get there. And the delivery of responsive repairs currently is changing, and it's changed huge amounts over the last 5 to 10 years. But having those reporting mechanisms that give us the time to repair, number of jobs overdue, they don't matter to customers. What matters to customers is, did we fix it right first time? Was it a fix that sticks? But then also on the back of that, are we going back there for the same problem or a different problem in a different room? So it starts to feed into your resourcing model. So the old world of a plumber going to the bathroom and a carpenter going to the kitchen, we need to look at ourselves in the mirror on a resourcing model.
Right, okay. So you're kind of talking about the technology there, but then also the need for having contractors who've got that multi-trade specialism as well, I guess, in terms of managing WIP. And what about the technology to sort of prevent damp and mould issues? Where do you see the real opportunities there?
In opportunities currently and going forward, I think there's around sensor technology.
Right.
So we can start being proactive and understanding with the data that we already know of, your surveyors or our surveyors that are going to properties on a ground floor of a certain archetype, and we go and deal with the root problem, rather than just solving the reactive damp and mould appearing, and using that data to replicate across stock.
Yeah. And how do you think that's changed things for you, having that kind of technology, be it sensor technology, being it AI, ML technology? How is that delivering for you as an organisation?
It's starting to feed into the business plan now, but it's definitely driven a very different conversation between repairs and asset, and in the middle, finance.
Okay.
So because there's a peak of financial demand when you're servicing the reactive and the proactive at the same time.
So is it helping to bridge those parts of the organisation, having that technological capability? So you talk about assets and repairs.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. And what about you, James? Where do you see the biggest opportunities for technology?
I think the biggest bit that we deal with on a daily basis operationally is it's very transactional, which is exactly what Suzy mentioned, where a customer will report in and it will just be, my upstairs toilet is currently leaking. And that's the only information we go. So we would deploy solely based on that. With the data that we have in the background, which AI will run through, it could identify sole toilet or second toilet. Is this been reported more than once? Has it been 3 times in the last 3 months? Is there a chance that there may then actually be a leak that's gone downstairs and created damp and mould in the room downstairs? So let's look at the habitat as opposed to just that one transaction of someone saying, this toilet is broken, please can you come and fix it? We then open that wider, that we can then look at a geographical location, so we can then look at, is that an issue on that street or in that block? Is it an archetype? Is it a retrofit that we did that failed? So we can then start looking, actually, are we doing bathroom component renewals? And there's a material there that's failing each time. So all this data gets fed back into us rather than just 3 different phone calls from different customers on different days with the same problem. So if we can fix it at source, that will then start to bring down our WIP because we're not wasting those journeys going out there. To move forwards into the future, things that we've already come across, so the sensors I absolutely agree with, and I do believe that that is the way forward where we're going to start looking. That will start to feed in that proactive data to us. But an example that we had, so we came aboard with yourselves and we ran through last winter using the damp and mould product. We had a block of flats we'd retrofitted there maybe 3 or 4 years ago, new heating systems, external insulation, clad, etc. And we had 4 properties that kept flagging up, and we're sort of racking our brains, and surveyors are going out there and we're looking at the components, and we've invested all this money. But the data that then said, actually, there's all these 4 and there's one in the middle, and that one in the middle has not contacted you. And we went and found out and looked into it, and it had been abandoned. And so that one property in the middle that hadn't contacted us, the silent one that wasn't there, was cold bridging and impacting everybody else around them. But without the data coming through and the map that the system will show, we would never have necessarily dot to dot. Or if we did do the dot to dots, it would have been 3 or 4 months down the line, and those families living with those issues would have been impacted for longer.
And just echoing what Michael was saying about bridging the gap between assets and repairs, have you got any examples that, I mean, has that been the same in your organisation? How these tech tools enable us in that respect?
Absolutely. So first of all, it will allow us to start to shape those renewal programs. So when we can look for, if it's an archetype that's failing because we're doing some defective works or retrofit works, but it may not have had the effect that we wanted. That could be a case because we can go and do works and then it may fail down the line. But with the data, we'll find that we don't just say, oh, we've spent the money there, so that must be fixed. So we can start to shape the spec of works along with the areas that we need to work in. And more importantly, we can then evidence it to our finance team in saying there's a real need for the spend. And because I've only visited that property once, because the data allow me not to waste that visit, I can now afford to invest on it because I'm not firefighting, spending all that money, attending to that property every single month, trying to get it fixed. I've fixed it once properly.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think it's really evident how technology solutions, like the ones that you've been speaking about, can really help to triage, to identify risk and also give us that greater visibility. But I suppose the real impact only really comes when you work cross-functionally. And I guess when we talk about wraparound service delivery, it'd be really interesting to understand what that means in your organisations. I mean, who else apart from repairs is involved? Because damp and mould is, it's not just the contractor, is it? There's a whole ecosystem and service around that.
For sure. So,
happy. I mean, to both of you. Great.
For sure. I mean, from our side, it's a much bigger setup than just a repairs team. The repairs team are there as a function to try and resolve that issue. We've got our colleagues, whether it might be someone in income that's gone and spoken to a customer, it might be someone in housing, it might be our money advisors. Fuel poverty is unfortunately rife at the moment within our sector, and that forms a huge issue of not being able to keep that property in an environment where it will thrive. It's causing much bigger issues that just a repair won't fix. So the input from those around you, them having the visibility and that data to know, actually, if I'm going out to this area, I need to have that conversation, or just the awareness on what to pick up. So it's much greater than just the repairs team.
And how does that, at the beginning we talked about the customer, how important is the wraparound service for the customer and delivering for them?
Yeah, I think the delivery mechanisms that we all have, be it your gas contractor, your DLO, your housing officers, wardens, cleaners, but stock condition surveyors, all the people that are going to our properties, visiting our customers, noticing stuff. It's the training, the collaboration, the learning and the education of them first. They're ultimately an extended version of your brand, and them feeding back. What matters to the customer most is how we can start making a lot of those visits at the same time, so the customer doesn't need to be at separate points.
Yeah, which is a balancing act, I imagine.
It's a huge balancing act, and I think it's a cultural shift to the way that we currently or have worked in the past, and there's some bits and pieces around making every visit count. And that's not just about what you see, but there's also who's going through the front door. Not to to create less inconvenience for
Yeah.
customers.
I'm interested in that though, because you say it's a change, but how much has the new regulation and the expectations actually changed the wraparound service that you deliver? So what was happening before, and how has this moved the conversation on
I think
to anybody that wants to answer
I
it?
think it's significantly shifted the sector. If we go 10 years ago, I think it's a fair assessment to say that you get a phone call come through and to a customer services team, and the response would be, open your windows and don't put your washing on the radiator. I think we've all heard that a million times before and never actually said, oh, could I just ask who's living in that property? And I can also see that you're in rent arrears at the moment. How are things at home? These are our customers. A lot of people say, oh, tenants and we're landlords. These are customers and these are their homes. And so we've adjusted that in a home that's being lived in, that's being loved and cherished, there might be young children that are just doing their thing and creating havoc. That's pretty normal. That doesn't then just mean that mould is then going to go up the walls.
Yeah.
Because someone's having a shower and not opening a window doesn't mean there's going to be mould going up the walls. Someone using saucepans doesn't mean that there's going to be mould going up the walls. We can say it 1,000,001 times. We always go back to fabric first. Is the fabric, is that structure correct? Have we invested what we need to in there? There is an education element. Our customers still need to be able to regulate that environment, but it's our responsibility to make sure that environment is stable and suitable for them. So if our heating component isn't there, if our insulation, if our ventilation, if those components aren't in place for our customers, they've never got a chance of being able to thrive in that home. So it's our responsibility to put it in place and to educate, and they're there to work with us. So we've had to very much change our model and how we communicate that.
Yeah.
Gone are the days of the red letters going through or the big red font saying, you must do this. It's not an us and them.
Well, that's a real shift, isn't it, between tenant and customer. I'm interested in that though, because you talk about educating the residents, but how have you ensured that that's cascaded down through the organisation? Because we talked earlier about cultural change. It's as much about ensuring that everybody in the organisation, works on that mindset now, isn't it?
Sure.
I'd just be interested to know how you do that as an organisation.
So the example I can give is we've rolled out damper mould training to all of our surveyors,
Right.
but in the business process flow that sits on a damper mould module that's deployed to mobile, there's a series of boxes where the surveyor needs to record conversations. So we can say that we've done X, Y, and Z on visit 1, or we've done A, B, C on visit 2, but we can also pull that into an after visit report added onto the schedule of works that the surveyor's derived, and it can list out what the surveyor has spoken to the customer about, what advice has been given, if we've left any leaflets or guides at the property, plus the schedule of works of plan to do.
So you get that really strong audit trail, which of course is required. Suzy, across all the organisations that you work with, what changes have you seen that make the biggest impact in moving from a reactive service to a proactive damp and mould approach?
Yeah, I think starting with letting go of the spreadsheet was a big one. I know we all love a spreadsheet. In reality, a spreadsheet is a very admin heavy task to keep updated. It's not real-time data. It's a human being that is updating, and it poses risk to the customer if we make an error with that. So lifting and shifting, so lifting all of that data and putting it into a system to create the efficiencies, to make sure that you completely understand every property that has reported damp and mould, not just now, but over the last few years, what's happened within that property. Are we compliant? Are we managing our processes by tracking every step of the process and highlighting where something maybe is going wrong? Inspections, how quickly can we get to an inspection? I work with surveyors, and the feedback is it can take hours to build a picture of a property using housing management systems where all the information is spread out, just to go into a property and be able to carry out that full inspection. So it's something that takes somebody hours to do can now take minutes. And it's putting the customer at the heart and making sure that we are aware of every property that has reported damp and mould, whether it was now or historically, and reducing that risk.
So it's really about surfacing and having that visibility, isn't it?
Yeah, and also creating efficiencies, because everybody is under the cosh with reactive repairs and damp and mould, and any efficiencies and time we can save for teams is only going to positively impact the customer in the long run.
And have you found that in your organisations, that by utilising certain technologies that has enabled the efficiencies that have been promised, and that allows you to then spend more time with customers?
Oh, for sure. I think one of the best efficiencies that we have is the case management system. So through the damp and mould system, it will have preset rules, so you can set those for your organisation, but you'd also have them in line with Arab's law as well. And our planning team, which, as all of them are, work flat out. They're a very, very busy section of the team. They really do hold everyone together. They've then got that safety net. So, for instance, if a damp and mould job is raised and we'll go out to attend, if we card that job, the system will automatically identify that that's been carded. It will then move it into a different pot saying, please action. And then if that's not been actioned, and you can then preset if you want it to be within 24 hours or 48 hours, it will continue to alert. So they've got that safety net there, which means they can then focus doing other things. They're not always scanning that diary for a carded job, or that one job that just goes into the system for it to never be seen again. And just that small safety net, and that's one of the rules that we've put. There's multiple others at every single stage. So from the customer calling in to the first appointment being made and kept, any follow-ons, there's all these safety nets that follow afterwards. And that's alleviated so much pressure off the planners, the team leaders, the supervisors, to ensure that none of them are being missed, because we know that they can't be now, and we can continue to work, and then at which point engage our housing team or other colleagues if access then becomes an issue.
And what does that do for the team? Because, I mean, I would hope that boosts morale, and thereby you're also providing a better service to your customers.
It certainly does, and I think this time of year, it's something in place which they would take or leave. Ask them again in December or January when we're absolutely at the peak. And it's a real big comfort blanket for them. It really does make them feel like they're protected. No other system that we've had, because it doesn't have the AI element. It'll always based on a process, but processes in systems can still break. But an AI system can't, because if someone's unfortunately set the workflow as a repair rather than a damp and mould, or they've set the priority at 28 days rather than 7 days, there can be a human error. But that system will scan through the pretext, it will know the customer, and it will say, actually, we're picking this up. Yes, there was a human error, but we've caught it for you.
That's really interesting. So as organisations, I mean, you all sound as if you're moving in the right direction, but looking ahead to the next 12 to 18 months, what's the main thing that you'll be focused on when it comes to managing damp and mould at scale? As you've said, there's a seasonality to this as well. So we're in the summer now, slight reprieve maybe, but as we're getting into the cooler months, I'd be interested to know what you're going to be focused on.
I think as we all try to manage the work in progress through the summer months, to create that capacity and diary capacity and resource capacity for winter, is also looking at we're just embarking on a project customer operating model. So we're starting to look at what does our resourcing look like? How do we need to set up differently? As an example, do I need bricklayers and ground workers working 12 months of the year, or do I have bricklayers and ground workers in consultation with customers? We do that for 9 months to add some additional resources into the winter peak to reduce our reliance on contractors.
So it really enables you to target your planning when you're looking ahead. Yeah. What about you, James? What are you focused on?
So we've been fortunate enough, having invested the time and gone through last year. We've allowed ourselves to be stress tested. We worked all of last year to Arab's law legislation, even though it wasn't in place, but that's what we set ourselves up to do, and we committed to our customers. So we've seen what one season looks like, and we know that I can't make it any prettier than what it is. It's tough. It's hard to get through, which means that resource needs to be right. But it also means, very, very similar to what Mike was saying, if you can shift anything into your summer months, then that will alleviate the pressure in the winters. So we've adjusted as well. We've adjusted our planned works a lot more into the summer. We're doing property MOTs in our summer to make sure they're the best they can be. We pulled stock condition forwards to make sure that, again, if there's any properties that need that attention now, they're getting it. Our boiler servicing has adjusted to a boiler MOT style, so it doesn't just get a service, it gets everything to go with it to prevent those breakdowns in the winter. It only takes the boiler to go down to then have the knock-on effect once the temperature of that property is dropped. So we've really adjusted. We've not at the moment increased our resource. We have worked with other externals to look at increasing our overflow should we need it come the winter months, because sticking to those time frames, it's not just the 14 days to attend to do your first fix or to do your survey, it's starting the works within 7 days after your report, or at least having a plan within those 7 days. So having that additional support on board. Some of these repairs aren't just a small plaster or a small patch, whether it's large amounts of brickwork, DPC works, external works, drainage, you need that infrastructure around you. So we did a lot of recce to make sure we have that in place. It's definitely changed us to a proactive approach.
I think it would be interesting for everybody else that's here that's representing organisations potentially. Obviously, you've come a long way on both your journeys at your organisation, but if a colleague from the audience came to you and asked you to help them, what one thing could they do to transform their damp and mould and their repairs service? What advice would you give to people? Michael, could I give that question to you? Put you on the spot.
I'll take two things. So the first thing is about being really, really clear.
Yeah.
So what is your standard? So what's your responsive repairs standard? What's your damp and mould standard? So what will you wash? What will you clean? What will you do a 3-stage on? What will you install ventilation on? Where is the collaboration required to resolve some problems, rather than just going, I've got this difficult job, I'll get a surveyor from Asset. So being really clear what your offer is at the onset, so you're making it that your surveyors, your schedulers, through the journey as easy as possible, to avoid any escalations. Because the minute the escalations come, that's when complaints, and it turns into a complex, in some cases turns into a complex case.
What about you, James?
For myself, I would probably say to pick an issue, be it a repair, whether it's a damp and mould case or a broken toilet, and I would ask a customer or my customer assembly how they believe the process is and the journey from calling in to when it's done. And I'd ask my colleagues in repairs or in customer services how they believe that process works. And I would compare the two together, and I'd implore all of you to do the same thing. Just because your processes are there doesn't mean they're working. On paper, they might work perfectly. In a system, they might work perfectly, but in real life, they might be broken. So stress test and break them. Continue to break them, and then work with your customers, work with your colleagues to rebuild them. It might mean that you bring in infrastructure, you might bring in systems, you might adjust the way you do your planning, adjust the way your tool, what type of tools or materials you use. It could be the smallest of changes. But just because we've all sat in a room and put some post-it notes down and said, this is how I used to do it, or this is how we've done it before, when we mark it through, does not mean that it's the right way. So if anybody will do anything, is break the process and rebuild it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, Suzy, obviously not from an operational perspective, but you work with lots of organisations. What would you say is one of the first things that you can do to transform your approach?
So I would go right back to basics and suggest, looking holistically at the culture of the teams delivering the repair service. I think when you are making changes, there's transformation, there's new technology, new processes, it's about including the really key people that are delivering your repair service on that journey, not just kind of telling them something's happened, engaging them, driving them to help deliver, the best repair service. So I know we believe that it's not just about putting a system into an organisation, it's around projects and working together to make those improvements. So as part of my role, I roll out a change management piece, and I have sat and talked to probably hundreds and hundreds of trade colleagues in person over the last few years since working at Mobysoft. And my advice would be talk to those teams more. because what they will tell you and the feedback they will give you is so valuable. They're the eyes and ears in the properties. They deal with customers on a daily basis. They will tell you how you can improve, and it's frustrating for those, on the ground as well. Some things that can be improved on. So I would think step back, look at things like performance measures. So are you performing management on the things that really matter? So quality approach, quality first, repair service. If you're, for example, performance managing a trade colleague on how many jobs they can get done in a day, you're not always going to have the quality. And it's around focusing on the right things that are going to drive the right behaviours and engaging the team in any changes that you are trying to make.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you so much to our panellists. That was really, really interesting. So I think it's really clear that to tackle damp and mould from a customer first approach, you've really got to have joined up systems, a responsive culture, and importantly, put the needs of residents first. So thank you all very much. I'll give you a round of applause.